Still in chapter 25. This is our second lecture. We're back in the conference room here. And this is the first one on duties of the parties. Under the UCC, there's not that many duties. And if you think about it, it's really not that complicated. Remember, this is transfer of title to tangible goods for a price. It's a simple transaction. We're buying or selling stuff. So the seller's duty is to deliver the goods on time pursuant to the contract. What that means is that you've built the right products pursuant to the specs, you've delivered them the way you're supposed to be delivered, and that they are on time, and off we go. So that is, you've completed your duties under the contract. If they fail to do it, that's the next chapter. Chapter 26 goes into, well, what happens if somebody fails? So leave that aside for the moment. And by the way, when the seller has to deliver, they have to deliver everything. So if it calls for 1,000 bushels of wheat and 995 are delivered, that is not a fulfillment of the duty. And the whole thing can be rejected because we ordered 1,000, not 995. Keep that in mind. The buyer's two duties: pay, of course, and the other one is the duty to inspect, basically. And what this means is that the duty is actually that you must accept conforming goods. That's how it's defined. What does that mean? You have a right to look at the goods when they show up. You don't have to. They show up in cardboard boxes. You have to open every box and make sure everything's in there, with a couple notable exceptions. If something is obvious that damage has happened, you need to note that. So when the trucker comes and delivers stuff on the dock and somebody signs for it, what they're signing for is, yeah, we got this many boxes. And I don't see any holes poked through with a forklift right through the boxes, something would be obvious. Or when I pick it up, I don't hear tinkling like broken glass because we ordered whatever. Knickknacks, please. So that's their duty. It's not a big one. But they have a right to refuse the shipment. It's called rejection. It's an important word because we've got a second word coming up down the road called revocation. That's different, but you need to understand the differences. So the buyer has the right to reject if anything is non-conforming, if the quantity's off by one, there's a coffee cup here, and underneath it there's some words there. Let's assume that whatever those words, I have no idea. One of them's misspelled. There's an A instead of an E. Can they reject the whole lot of these coffee cups? Yes, they can. If we're supposed to be pursuant to the contract, they can be as picky as they want to be because that's the way we ordered it. You should have done it the way that the contract said. So if you fail to do that, then the buyer can reject it. Next. The UCC also says, let's not waste things. So they give the seller the right to cure, C-U-R-E, cure, fix the problem. And they can fix it by offering to do it, or delivering the rest of them. Technically, UCC says it has to be done by the time that the contract calls for the performance. The time it's supposed to be shipped or whatever. True. Realistically, if that's not a hard date, if it's not, it's got to be that date. There's a little bit of looseness there. Usually, of course, are somewhat reasonable about this in terms of somebody trying to get it fixed. Years ago, I worked for a machine tool manufacturer, and some of these assemblies and machine tools were pretty big, and they would be shipped out by truck. And in the course of shipping out by truck, they would be shaken and rattled and everything else in the truck. And when they were put back together, it wouldn't quite work right. It just had to be adjusted. So that the manufacturer was allowed to cure it. They'd send an engineer out, somebody out to go adjust it so that it was back the way it's supposed to be. And that's a normal thing that happens. So the flip side of this is if the buyer doesn't have any issue, it doesn't reject, then they must accept. You have a duty to accept conforming goods, conforming to the contract. And certainly by saying they're good, you've obviously done your acceptance. Your silence is also an acceptance. The fact that you use them or put them out for sale is basically an acceptance. And to do otherwise, you'd have to reserve your rights by letting them know. Now, it can happen that down the road, you discover something about the product that you wouldn't have noticed on first inspection, that it's defective. So, let's go back to this. Let's assume, let's say, stay stressed and give up. There you go. What a theme, huh? Let's say that we ordered, a gross of these. That's a dozen. And we get them in, and we've been selling them. We've only got like 30 left, and some customer notices on the bottom that it's misspelled. Well, we've had these for a year. Can I revoke my acceptance at this point because it's non-conforming? Because it is non-conforming. The answer is no. It must be a substantial impairment. That's just picky and not very important. Now, if this thing wouldn't hold up after 3 times it went through the dishwasher, if it was supposed to be dishwasher safe or whatever, microwave safe, and began to crack or whatever, that's a substantial impairment. It's not doing what it's supposed to do, be a coffee cup. So then you can revoke the acceptance. And again, this too is within a reasonable period of time. And you have to give notice to them as soon as you become aware of what it is that's defective on it now, such that it's a substantial impairment. Once notice is given to the seller of this, the buyer has a duty, not a big one, but they have a duty to hang on to it for the seller to come get it. Now, reasonable under the UCC, right? So if this was one of those machines that I was talking about, you can hold it for a week, just put it off to the side and let them come and get it. It's not that big of a deal. What if it's ice cream? And what if the ice cream that you had ordered for grocery store had the wrong milk fat? We talked about that once before, remember? That's really important, ice cream. Okay, so you tell them, hey, we're rejecting this. We're, whatever. We're revoking acceptance, whatever we're doing. If it's in the middle of summer, you can't say, I'm putting them on the dock right now, you better come and get them because they're going to melt. And by the time you get there, they're all melted. That's not taking care of the goods. You would have to keep them refrigerated or whatever for a short period of time to allow them to come back. So, other than that, a buyer has a duty to pay, which is natural. They're supposed to pay for it, supposed to pay in full, and that's the duties. That's the chapter.